Hello everybody and welcome to the Forge Within podcast, where we have real people telling real stories about how mental health has changed their lives, and hopefully together we can start changing the stigma around mental health. So today's conversation is about honesty. It's also about things we hide, the masks we wear, and what happens when coping turns into survival. So today's guest is Daniel Richards, and he has chosen to share his story openly, for the not for sympathy or anything, but for understanding what his life has been like. So without further ado, how are you, Dan? You okay?
I'm very well, thank you, my love. Thank you for having me on.
Not a problem whatsoever. It's my pleasure to have you in here today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've read an awful lot, looked a lot of your videos as well. I'm just really interested in hearing your story and how your story can then help a lot of people out there as well. So I can't wait to get started. So we'll start with just generally the open question. What made you feel that you were ready to tell your story at this present moment in time?
I think for me, to get my message out there was because there's so many people who are suffering with mental health that then sadly leads on to addictions, and that's where my story lies. And I felt like if I can start breaking that stigma where people don't have to wear masks and don't have to hide and be secret about what they're actually going through, that will then help people go and get the help they need instead of being ashamed and cutting themselves off. And then sadly, that could lead to not being on this earth anymore. So I think, addictions really needs that stigma broken down with it.
No, I think that's a really interesting concept. I battle an awful lot when I speak to people around that kind of guilt and embarrassment about coming out and talk about the mental health. And the more we start transitioning through this process of becoming open and talking, I really do hope, and with the stories like yourselves, that people feel less alone, that they feel as if they get strength. You become, within yourself, you become an inspiration and to a lot of people to come out, and if they pick up one thing from what you say in this conversation today and then they move forward, then you've done your job, which I think is an incredibly brave thing, not just to come online and talk, but to come on a podcast and talk openly about your life. It's incredibly, I'm incredibly proud and incredibly happy for you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No problem. So, right, what we'll do, we'll go right the way back and try to understand how things work. So, childhood, we'll go right back to childhood stuff. So, when you look back, when do you think that your mental health story began?
I think when I look back at my childhood, I think from a very young age, I'm from a small village called Abertrader, just outside Caerphilly. That's where I was born. And, it's that typical small village. It was, mining mentality, I call it, that's, men were men and you had to be a man. And I think from a young age, me understanding that I wasn't like the other boys who I was friends with, I could tell there was something different about me. And I think that's where was probably me hiding a lot of how I was feeling started. So I think my mental health journey must probably started at a very young age of hiding stuff. And then things happened where we lost a family home at a young age. So I think that's where my mental health started in my early years.
So you said about like losing the family at the age of 10. What did that do for your sense of safety?
I think, when the one day, you're living in the house that you love, you've got all your friends are on your doorstep, to then suddenly being uprooted. We were then put into a council house down in Lansbury Park, which isn't a million miles away from Abertrader. But when you are then leaving your friends who you're used to going out and calling on every night, and, that does wonders for how you feel going out with your friends, just mucking around, to then all of a sudden you haven't got those friends on your doorstep. And I think also it almost shows that something can just happen so suddenly when you think everything is going really well in life, even at that young age.
Yeah, no, I get that. I went through a similar situation with myself when I was 18 years of age when we lost the family home, and the impact that had was astronomical. So I totally understand that. I really do. I really do understand the impact that can have on you as a person, the life, and then transitioning. It's surprising what that upheaval can do, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, I was 10, so I was in my last year of junior school. You're about to go up to comp. And that was then thinking, oh, well, getting the bus to comp was going to be on a new bus to where all my friends would be on. And, you know, Lansbury Park was actually, when we lived there, when we got there, was really nice, but it's got a bad press. So at a young age, you're worrying about that bad press and what you're going to be moving into. But, thankfully, when we did move there, the people in our street were lovely and really took us under their wings.
Oh, that's really nice though. At least you start building them foundational blocks of having that kind of safety net that is around you. And when we talk about safety, it's massive within mental health when we address these kind of issues as well. But did you mentioned when we spoke as well, you mentioned about your dad. Your dad left at 15, is that right?
Yeah, so I had another house move. We were only in Lansbury for 6 months, then we moved to Penrowell. Um, and everything then started going really well again. So I got to Penrowell when I was 11, just as I was going into comp. And to my eyes, looking at my parents' marriage, I thought they had an incredible marriage. I never really witnessed them arguing. I never witnessed them bickering. My dad was a very caring and loving dad, very hands-on with us, always wanted to make sure we were okay because he himself had he lost his mum when he was 13. He didn't know who his dad was. So he had a very troubled childhood, my dad. So I think that made him then even more loving of us, that he wanted to make sure we were always happy and we could feel his love. And the same with my mum then. My mum was always a very affectionate person. So I always thought our family dynamic was fab. And then the one day my dad just goes, I'm going, I'm leaving. And it just completely shattered our home because there was no warning signs. It was just a complete bolt out of the blue. And I just couldn't get my head around why he was doing it.
How did that make you feel as a young lad around that age? That must have been like my father left when I was 3 years of age. He was still around, but anyone knows my dad as well. He's he's like Peter Pan, amazing person, but he's like Peter Pan. But again, he's more like my really good friend than he is like my dad. But he was still around. But to up and leave at 15, that must be really difficult.
It was difficult because it wasn't. So when he first said he was going, he went for a little short period of time and then came back. And we thought then everything was going to be okay again. And then he left again then. But by the time he left again, so I used to, when I was a kid, my dad was a manager of a cleaning company, and I used to go around working with him after school, cleaning a building down in Treforest. So after he left the second time then, he's basically telling me that he hadn't loved my mum since I was about 3 years of age. He only stayed because he didn't want us to have a child look like he had. And the one day then, I was on work experience and my mum had been picking me up and he was there. And at this time, I thought he'd left, he wasn't coming back. So he said, oh, no, I am coming back. And I then had to say to my mum, like, he doesn't love you. He's only coming back because of us. Like, and I had to tell him to leave. I wanted him to leave because I knew he was just going to end up leaving us again. So I wanted to almost not take control of it, but be there for my mum because my mum took it really bad and I could see what it had done to her. And I thought, I don't want her to go through that heartbreak again.
Yeah, that must have been That must have been so hard. And when we look at the masks, you're already developing a few masks there now. The mask of like the one I can mainly see is the strong one mask. So do you that I held the strong one mask for an awful long time, but listening to your story there or so far, did you find that the strong one mask took a really firm grip and not only that, but how early did you learn to hide that? How can I say? How early did you learn to hide how you really felt basically about it all because you wanted to be strong?
I think from the age of 15, I think that was when, like, my mum took it horrendous and she needed help. So I felt like, although inside my heart was breaking, I was breaking, I couldn't put that extra strain on her. So I just develop, like you said, you develop a mask where you just constantly go, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine. But then that's carried then right through life because you've got this mask on where you don't want to worry people and show people you are breaking, but you are breaking inside.
It sounds so familiar to what I went through, and it's quite comforting to hear that someone else, as well as I've spoken to people and they've said the same, but it never gets old hearing people who have been through that to try and reinforce how I felt as well. And that is, you just feel overwhelmed and you're exhausted and you don't know what to do. It's so difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, that was for me, 15, I was going into GCSEs. So it was a stressful enough time as well. And then put that on top of it. So there was just always a lot of noise in my head, but I was never voicing that noise out. It was just always getting suppressed.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And I know if we move, just going on the back of that as well, then we were talking about when you're trying to be the strong one and hiding things as well. I know that hiding your sexuality for years was hard as well. But what did that teach you about hiding parts of yourself, that strong one mask and that combined?
I think it almost when you just you want to fit in, don't you? You're almost then pleasing everyone else around you and not looking after you. You're trying to be something that you're not for that person who is in front of you. I almost felt like a bit of a chameleon. I was constantly like changing my personality to fit who I was with.
Yeah, no, that sounds all too familiar as well. When you're trying to become something, it's like people pleasing, and when you reinforce that then with being from the community that you were from, with the old miner perspective, man, and all that, those kind of methods and theories are starting to be reinforced in your mind, and then you start questioning whether you are different and why you should be feeling this way. So you're at an inner conflict with yourself of like personal identification and everyone else's perception in you as well. So throw the mask in there as well, and that's just a cocktail for a lot of trauma that didn't develop to thrive.
I can see that, and like I think that then has fed right through my life with how I cope with situations.
Yeah, definitely. So when we look at exhaustion is another thing then when we talk, and I know that I get very exhausted in how I perceive things and if I'm trying to hide things. But what kind of other emotions was it just exhaustion, or when you were trying to pretend that you were okay but you're not? Was there any other things that you suffered with in regards of how it made you feel?
Yeah, I think from a young age, I always had anxiety, although I didn't know that it was anxiety because at the time, I'm 38. So there's a lot of stuff we didn't really understand as well back then. So, I always felt that I was on edge and, you're constantly worried about, because you're lying about how you are feeling, and then you think, oh, what if I slip up? And you just felt almost on like a hamster wheel. You're going just around and around, and you can't get off of that then.
That's it's a constant wheel of emotion. It's like the self punishment. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, and you just can't get out of that violent process, which is just, it feels like it's just spinning you up and just spitting you out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did you even realize you were doing like feeling anxious all the time, or did it just become a normal part of your everyday life?
I think I think you just get so used to it. I think because like, I knew by that point, I knew like I knew I was gay from a young age. But I think by that point then at 15, I knew I was 100% gay, but I couldn't come out because the stigma attached to that. So then you are just constantly in a lie, so the lies just start becoming normal, and then the hiding of your feelings become normal. So I think you just, that state of anxiety that I most probably lived in was just a normal life for me.
Yeah, and again, that is something that so many people suffer with, is the normalization of their feelings, even if they're wrong, even if they don't feel right, they still try to normalize it to compare. Well, I should feel this way. I got to feel this way. Whether that's a societal change, whether that's your environmental pressure, but normalization of your feelings, if they're bad and bad towards you, is an all too known trait that people experience as well. And as you move with that feeling, then of you're hiding the fact that you're gay as well and coming forward, I know you then went into business, didn't you, as well? So when you add that into it as well, what happened to your sense of self then as you transitioned then into that, with all this baggage behind your mind? How did that, when you transitioned, how did that affect your sense of self?
I think like by the time I came out when I was 18, 19, so by that point then I was living a bit more of an open life, with regards to going out dating boys and so on. My family all knew. My family all took it well when I came out. My dad was very supportive. And then I think going into, again, I think when I went into the business, I was very grateful at the time for for the opportunity of going into the business because my old business partner was my boss at one time, and I felt very grateful because financially I never had a lot financially. Like as a young kid, my friends' parents were all very wealthy and my parents didn't have any money. So it was almost then when I had that business opportunity, I jumped at that chance because I thought that this would then put me on like life path of better things. But again, I think I went into it trying to please someone else more than myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, because I've done that. I went into a situation in 2018 when I had a really comfy job working, as people know, I had a really comfy job working Torvine Council with adults with learning disabilities. Loved it, absolutely loved it. And then it's when you think the grass is always green on the other side. It was one of them things, and even though the wife told me, look, you need to just focus on, I'm happy the way things are, I'm happy with the job that you've got, you don't have to do anything. I kind of chose personal gratification over the wife and family. I went into a business I had absolutely zero idea about. I didn't feel prepared. I felt totally overstimulated. It didn't link into my mental health because I was already struggling at the time. And by doing that, I ended up put myself in the worst situation I could with my mental health, where I nearly took my life on Christmas Day. So sometimes pleasing other people and following other people instead of following your gut and what works for you is can be really dangerous sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that, like, when I look back now, there is there's a lot of why did I do that in a way? I think because myself and my old business partner, although I still love the man to bits, he did do a lot of good for me, and always be forever thankful for that. But we were completely two polar opposite people, and it was never really going to work. But I just kept trying to make it work because I didn't want to let him down. But then I was constantly then living a lie because I was so unhappy for so long that then my mental health was just spiraling down and down and down.
Yeah, I totally get it. I always say, and when I do my talks, I say that the most important person in your life is you. There's no other person more important than you, because if you want to be the best version for someone else, you need to become first the best version of you. And it's so important because we always put other people before ourselves instead of thinking, well, what's actually good for us.
Yeah, and I think, so my business was hairdressing. I'm a hairdresser. So I think that's another thing where you almost feel like you're on a stage I would walk into the door of the salon and it'd be like Dan the hairdresser persona gets put on, and I'd hide again, you're hiding behind a mask because you're breaking and you're just constantly trying to look after everyone else to make sure everyone else is happy, and you were inside going, I just don't want to fucking be here, like I'm breaking.
Yeah, I'm smiling at myself because that's exactly how I felt. It's the facade, and a lot of people who knew me in Tredegar would be like, I'd never. Even now, when I do the talks, are like, "What, you suffered with mental health?" I was like, "Yeah, I was crippled with mental health." And if you went prior to 2007, I was still crippled with it, even though I was a high function, high achiever, because I was doing really well in school and I was doing well within badminton, but it was still hard. It was so difficult. But when you had a hairdressing business and you're working and you're putting that facade on, trying to become the strong one for everyone else, what happened to you in the background?
Well, that then I would say is where alcohol started playing a big part of my life. That I could go into work, I would be what everyone else wanted me to be, the larger than life character, and I'd shut that salon door and be like, I know that I can go home now and have a drink to calm myself back down, because I was just a million miles an hour in my head. So I knew that the alcohol then was going to chill me and relax me.
Yeah, when did you think then? Because that sounds like obviously like a social event. People get really stressed within work. I don't drink. I give up drinking back in 2018. So a good few years ago now, about 8 years ago. I think that works out right. And about 8 years ago, I give up. Which I don't miss it, because when I'm out, I'm the still fun loving, having a laugh character, larger than ever character. So it doesn't bother me. It is hard when you go out sometimes and then you're in a social environment and you can't drink. So I understand why people do when they're in a really stressed environment and they feel that they need a drink. But the key is, I think, with yourself is, when did that alcohol, that like social aspect of going home and having the odd glass of wine, when did that start turning into something else?
I would say that was probably started, what are we now, with 2026. I would say maybe 2018 was when it started becoming, I had to have a drink when I got home, because that would be the only thing to relax me and for me to be able to get my thoughts together.
So that's when it became an everyday thing then.
It was, yeah, I suppose it became an everyday thing. I could then go a little, like maybe a day or two, but I knew that alcohol started playing a part in my life unhealthily about, yeah, 2000. Actually, no, I think it was before then. I think alcohol's always had a really unhealthy part in my life where I've used it as a coping mechanism and a crutch. But I would say daily dependency of it, but still functioning, that no one else really had a clue, away from, say, maybe like my partner and my family. I would say, yeah, 2018 was when it started creeping into that daily, and then even more so on the weekend socializing.
Yeah, do you think it started then, that form of needing to drink every day? Because when we look at negative coping strategies, one of mine was just becoming manic and self-indulgent. I would implode. If I went to the gym, I'd have to lose 20 stone. Even though I'm not 20 stone, I'd have to lose like 3 or 4 stone within 4 weeks. Otherwise, it was a failure. And then I would jump to something else. So that's part of my manic persona. That is when I know that things are getting worse. But that's a negative coping strategy. I got a lot of positive things now where I sit at home. I got a games console. That's my way of just taking myself away from that situation. So there's some really exciting things when we go through that method. But when do you think that you picked that up or learned it from somewhere to develop that negative coping strategy?
Um, well, I think this is where I get a bit when I look at like addictions, where my so addiction runs in my family. My uncle died of alcoholism. My grandmother died of alcoholism. My dad had unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and my mum like refers to it as like the Richards gene in me. She'll go, "You've got that Richards gene in you." So I don't know if maybe it's always been in the background a bit, and you know, socially, I think people I get from a young age, I'd go on nights out. I again, like you said, with you, bit of life and soul, the party, drinking has always been in my life. But then when it started becoming a point of where I could feel I was losing myself, that I didn't feel like Dan anymore. That's when then I had to have that drink to make me feel like Dan again. It'd give me that boost of, oh, you're back. You calmed down now.
Yeah, okay. What do you find then that was doing for you on an emotional level?
I think on an emotional level, I felt it was calming me. It was relieving the anxiety of constantly, that persona was always, I was doing really long hours in the salon. I could do like 12-hour days, and I was exhausted from doing a performance. And then I was like, in my head, that's going to chill you out. That's going to calm you and make you feel well again, I suppose. It was almost like medicine.
So when you were on that express train then of constant workload of like six to 12 hours flat out trying to put this mask on, I know then that alcohol issue that we started developing, then you started introducing cocaine into the picture. Is that right?
Yeah, so cocaine came into my life in about 2022. Um, Purely by that point, I was really heavily dependent daily. Like we're talking 1 or 2 bottles of wine a night. And me and my partner started having problems with he's worried about my drinking, my family, my closest friends are all casually bringing up the topic like, do you think you have an alcohol problem? And I was like, well, no, I don't. I'm a binge drinker because I knew I had an alcohol problem, but I didn't want to voice that because of the stigma attached to it. You know, I look at people who I knew had problems, and although there was a person in my life and she was alcohol dependent, and I always used to try to help her because I felt for her, but I didn't want to admit to my family and friends that I had it. So then the cocaine came in about 2022 because I could use that then without anyone knowing I was on alcohol, or some days I wouldn't use the alcohol then. I would just have the cocaine because you can hide it better. Yeah, I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of shame, anger. I was angry at myself because I just couldn't get myself out of this situation. And though it was then those emotions I felt like most probably then was growing the addiction and the dependency, because I would wake up then so disappointed and angry at myself, and I do it again because I know that that was going to quieten down the voices in my head. So you are just in that loop then, isn't it? You're in that addiction cycle where you can't get off it.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of people within the Welsh valleys as well. I'm not saying there's other places from the UK, but being from the valleys and the deprivation which is in the valleys as well, it's all too familiar for a lot of people when they use alcohol to try and function, to ignore about things and getting caught then in this like loop. That's a really good thing to actually look at and see, is that when we're stuck in that never-ending loop, you just go on and on and on, and every day becomes the same, and it's the only way that you can function through the day. And then you add guilt and other factors into it as well, guilt, anger. And when we look at today's society and the current suicide rates and see how high they are, then that just signals really where we are, where people, they get to that point, and when they can't get help because of services, because they're not open, hence why, like at the moment, I'm teaching the Forge method to people about going through denial into empowerment, to try and feel as if they can be open and talk about their mental health instead of just letting it lie and trying to process it. It's a very, very hard job to do at the moment for everyone, but the way that you are talking about it and showing where you've come, and we'll get into that in a bit now, is extraordinary. So it's incredible to hear the story you're from, because a lot of people do not manage to go through them periods of their life, actually find purpose, which is a massive word, purpose in life. And then not only that, go out there to help others when you've been there yourself. So that's really good of you.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's right. Like that word purpose, you are right there. Like for me, I said this to my partner the other day. I feel like I've found a purpose in life now. This is what I need to do, is to help others, because for so long, maybe if I saw someone locally around by me who was open and had turned their life around from addictions, that I might have said, "Do you know what? It's not, you don't have to feel like shame and guilt about it. It's happened. Life has caught up with you, and sadly, you developed an unhealthy coping mechanism, but you can get out of that cycle."
Yeah, and I said last week on the podcast that when I'm on this course at the moment doing therapeutic trauma, and it's an incredible course. But what's really interesting about it is that I suffer with PTSD and a general anxiety disorder, but I didn't know that you could overcome PTSD. I thought PTSD was really for life, and it isn't. You can actually overcome it. So when you have that, knowing you can overcome alcoholism, even though you are an alcoholic for life, as you don't want to go back to it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be an alcoholic in regards of you're going to be drinking every single day. If you put the right coping strategies in place, you can actually overcome those things, which is incredible strength. But the one thing I want to pick up on as well with yourself, you said through it all that it helped you, and I'll hyphen this as well, function normally. So I want you to explain that, because with the alcohol and with the cocaine, and when you combine those things and all that chaos is going on in your mind, how do you find that it helped you function normally?
Well, by what I mean by like it helped me function normally was that I felt at peace. And so if, for instance, I was having a really stressful time, I would do a line or two, and that would quieten down my head. My head was always filled with noise. It was always, I've always got that inner monologue is constantly going. But when I do cocaine, that would go, and I would almost look, well, to me, I would just look normal, and I hid, so no one knew I was on cocaine until it all came out when I went missing. So I think that's how then it made me normal. It made me just look like Dan, and I felt quiet and at peace.
Yeah, it's normally when we find them moments. I kind of symbolize it to be in a tropical storm, and then you're right at the center, so nobody can see. But then, like, really, the chaos is frantic. Really, it's enormously frantic. But it's to other people, they just see the calm demeanor, the face, the loving person who's laughing and giggling. But really, behind that is just this violent storm of things going on, and it's ready to blow. It's ready to come out, but how it comes out, you don't know. When it's going to come out, you don't know, but it's going to come out. It is going to come out in some stage or form.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good way to describe most probably how I was. It was a constant storm, but to everyone else, it was calm at times. Only at times, because there was times that my guard would slip or something would happen with regards to the alcohol. If I'd had too much alcohol, then I would crumble a bit, but I'd always try and backtrack on that crumble.
Yeah, no, I get it. I really, really do get it. And I know that you've mentioned previously before the call come on today that you when your dad passed, that really did amplify things for you. And so I just want to ask, how did it when you? I know it's really emotional to touch on, but I know that you wanted to bring it up as well about how that felt when your dad passed away and the impact that had on you with the alcohol and with the cocaine as well.
So when my dad passed, I wasn't using cocaine at that time. It was only ever alcohol. But yeah, when my dad passed away, again, that was very, very sudden. My dad went in for an operation to have something fixed, and we thought he was going in and out of the operation. We knew he'd be put into a coma for a couple of days, but then he would come out of there and everything would be okay. But sadly, he didn't make it out of the operation because we didn't realize the severity of what was going to be happening, and he hid it from us. So that when my dad died, I was then drinking on. I was angry that he died because in my adult years, me and my dad, when he left us and he met his new partner, he almost set up a new life. And I always felt that at that point then he left me and my sister behind a bit. And I was angry at him for that. And just before he passed away, he came and lived with me for a little bit, only a month. And he lived with myself and my partner. And I felt like we were starting to work through some issues that we most probably sort of spoke about many years previously. So when he died then, I felt like there was still so many unresolved issues that I didn't have a chance to talk to him about, how things that he made me feel, I think things I most probably made him feel. And there was a lot of unfinished business. And then that then would lead me to drink on top of that, because I had all this, again, there's all the noise in your head, and you just go, I know what's going to quiet that down. I'm going to go and neck a nice bottle of Sauvignon Blanc.
And that's how the grief fed into the addiction then.
I think so, yeah. Because even, further on, like years down the line then, my dad died 2018. No, 2018. Or just before, sorry, 2017. So then, yeah, I think whenever I would have a drink, you've got all this turmoil inside you that then will drip out in drips and drabs, and situations that you haven't resolved with people and so on. And then, yeah, it all feeds into this, the addiction and noise in your head. And, you are getting further and further. I felt like I was getting lost in that black cloud, and I was getting deeper and deeper into the darkness of the cloud.
Yeah, I'll ask you something because I think it's having that point to reflect back on. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. That's fine. But what do you think you never got a chance to say to your father?
I think I just never got the chance to say that I was sorry. There was things I must probably hurt him, but he hurt me as well, and we never got to speak about that. And I think I never got the chance to say truly how much I loved him.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell it's a difficult topic, and when we look back and we look at like regret and we look at grief and things, it's one of those things that can consume us, and to a lot of people, it sticks with us for an awful long period of time. But what I do know, or what I 100% do know, is that if he's up there looking down, he looks at what you're doing now and creating, and we'll get into that in a bit, of where you've come from and how you've turned things around, and now you're using your experiences to help other people. He's going to be extremely proud of you, my friend.
Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate that.
That's no problem at all. So what I want to do, I want to move into the point of the collapse side of it then. So when you're all kind of come to the figurehead. So I know you were looking at the notes as around about 2024. You said that kind of, that was like total burnout and a loss of control. But what I want to do is just try to paint that picture of what did life actually look like day to day at that point.
Well, I think so. 2023, the end of 2023, I left the business partnership. Again, I left there telling him that I needed to leave to get well, because at that point I was flat out on the drink and the coke every day, and in the nights, hiding it, going to work. I might have a little bit here and there during the day to keep me going of coke, but majority was in the night. I would say that I was working late, and really I would just be in the salon having a glass of wine or two and having a line of coke or two. So by that point, then I decided that I had to leave the business partnership to try and sort myself out and get myself well. And it wasn't the ending that I wanted. It was messy. It was hard, and I then was spiraling more and more, where I'd set up a little salon on my own, and I was waking up some days and just riddled with anxiety. I'd start drinking, I'd start sniffing. And so 2024 then was when it started going down and down and downhill. I had some all right points in 2024 where I could manage to keep that mask on for a couple of days and pretend that everything was fine. But I was still then maybe using the cocaine at that point, and a little bit of alcohol in the night, because I was always I was doing one without the other, trying to sustain it. But then by the middle of 2024, I was dependent heavily daily. I was doing about 4 bottles of wine a day. I was doing 8 bags of cocaine a day, just to get me through that 24 hours. And yeah, I was watching my bank account just plummet. I had thousands and thousands in savings, and I'm just sat in my bedroom, sniffing coke on my own, drinking wine on my own in a dark room with God knows what playing on the telly. And then just getting more and more like, what are you doing with your life? But I couldn't stop. I physically couldn't stop it.
Yeah, because I know you mentioned that you said you couldn't really go like 10 minutes without drinking.
I couldn't go 10 minutes without a wine or a lime.
That's yeah, you're a poet and you didn't know it. But no, when we look at anything to do with like the trauma perspective of how we perceive situations and how we break things down, your body must have been in absolute turmoil, and you're having the real highs of the buzz of the cocaine, but then you're having the really drips and drobs then of the alcohol, which is bringing you down. So it's a very, very violent. How long do you reckon that process went on for?
How long was I doing like that amount, or?
Yeah, that would to that degree because your body must have been smashed to bits.
So I was doing that for a good few months. October time then, in September, October time in 2024, I admitted to everyone I had, my family, I was like, I am definitely an alcoholic. I need help. So I started to, with the help of my family, I started weaning myself off alcohol, but I was still doing the cocaine. But no one had any idea I was on the cocaine. So I was still doing 8 bags a day, and they just thought, oh, I was lying to them, telling them that, I'm fine. I started going to AA at the time then to pretend that I was getting better, I suppose, but still doing one thing to keep me getting through the day. But then I started secretly drinking again then behind their backs in the December time, and then in the January of 2025 is when everything went bang.
Yeah, so before it went bang, and we'll get into that bit now. The turning point really is, did any part of you know that things were slipping in that dangerous direction?
Yeah, I think I knew from from the August time of 2024, I started slowly planning to end my life. I started making funeral arrangements and notes. I'd started planning things, but by that point as well, I was under the mental health team, but I didn't tell the mental health about the alcohol and cocaine, and then I stopped seeing them because I just told them that I was fine. So I knew that everything was going to come to a big, massive, dramatic end.
It's kind of leading up to that moment, and that all the dominoes are falling, and you just lose control. You can't. It just and twice I've been there, and it's a horror. If anyone who's listening has been through that, then the way that you just spoke about it it can raise the hairs on people's bodies because it's not a nice situation to be in. You feel you're alone, the world's against you, and you know that as much as you want to not get to that stage, you feel your body being dragged in that direction.
Yeah, and then that's the scary thing. I felt so isolated and on my own, but I had tons of people around me showering me with love and affection, but I felt I was just on my own. And the only thing that was keeping me alive was the wines and the lines. Because without them, I didn't want to be here.
Yeah, it's a relationship, and you build a stronger relationship with the drugs and everything because they are protecting you and giving you this artificial world because your body doesn't want to actually own up to the fact that you are struggling. So pride gets in the way. There's just so many different aspects. What if people look at me differently, and then your ego is taken over, and then before you know it, something tragic happens. But that's where we'll get into next. So when you reach that point, then, and I got the date on you, I got the 22nd of January 2025, and what I want to do in this, you can go as much as you want or not because the episode's explicit anyway. But when you reached that point where you try to end your life as you've told me before, what was happening emotionally leading up to that point?
So, Christmas of 2024, that solidified that in my head, this is my last Christmas. I'm not going to be here. And I slowly started saying my goodbyes to the people I loved. Um, And then going into the January of 2025, I was like almost, I suppose, plucking up the courage, started to build myself up. So on the 20th of January, I booked a hotel in Newport. I booked a travel lodge and started getting tablets together, started getting knives and things, and hid them ready to go down on the 22nd to take my life. So my partner went to work in the morning. I said my final goodbyes to him. He kissed my dogs and said my goodbyes to them and told them to look after him and to be kind to whoever he meets next. And I took myself to Newport. I put my phone in flight mode because I knew that they use your phone to ping to try and work out where you are. So I went into Newport and I started drinking to give me the courage. As I was drinking, I was taking tablets. And I then went back to the room, drank a bit more, took some more tablets. And then the next thing I know is I woke up then. It was sick around me where I must have been sick in my sleep. And I looked at my phone, it was the next morning, so the 23rd. And I had a knife at the side of me on a countertop. And I said to my dad, I said, if you don't want me to do this, you've got to do something now, because this is it. I'm going to be with you otherwise. And I went to pick up the knife, and it was as if someone just slapped my hand. The knife dropped, and I said, you need to get help, and you need to be honest. So I rang my partner, and he was frantic. He was like, where are you? I said, I'm in the travel lodge. Please come and get me. So the police were involved, unbeknown to me, because they were out looking. People were out looking everywhere in Caerphilly for me. The police come to my house to do a welfare check. And then that was the point then where I thought, I want to be in this world and I want to get better. And that was the turning point where I told everyone closest to me at the time they knew about the drinking, but more people then found out about the drinking. Unbeknown to me, one of my friends knew that I would do coke now and again on nights out, and randomly said to my sister, and my sister had a gut feeling that I was on coke, but never said anything. And they asked me then and said, are you taking coke as well? And I said yes. They'd got in contact, somehow found out my dealer, got in contact with my dealer. My dealer said, look, I've tried stopping him getting it. I've been worried sick about him, but he'll come up and get it when he's off his face and whatever more. And that's when it was the turning point of my life, the 23rd of January 2025, when I said I need to change.
I've sat through all that, and the hairs on my arms are sticking up because there was a similar situation to me in Thailand, and I've said it before, where I was just about to go and do something, and I've said on all my talks, and this is my book, and I was there took all the photos down, and I was just about to jump off the balcony, and my phone rang, and it was my mother, and she said, what was wrong? She had a gut feeling, and I said, I'm not okay. And whether you call that, and I'm not a religious person at all, but whether you call that divine intervention, I don't know. But it does make you think that, looking at where you've been, I've literally just wrote down in my notebook here, look at you 1 year on. And I've literally just looked at that of you now, thinking we're talking not far off 1 year ago, where you're in that crisis stage, in that hotel room, and now you're doing what you're doing. Now you're on a podcast, being open to the world. When a year ago, which is blowing my mind, a year ago you were in a stage of pure denial, and within a year you've now pushed yourself through. Yes, you're not the finished article yet, and I think you'll openly admit that, but you are now in a stage of empowerment, and you're starting to acknowledge and accept things the way that they are, and holding yourself accountable, and you know the steps that you're going forward. So literally, I've put in big, massive writing on my notepad for you. Look at you 1 year on, and that just symbolizes it. So that's wow, incredible. Just something to touch on. It must have been hard for when we said about your dealer as well. That must have been so difficult for your family to get in contact with your dealer and then say to, we won't single out names and all that kind of stuff, but it must have been really hard for them to say, well, he was supplying you with it, and they must have felt, well, why did we keep giving it? So it must have been a really, really difficult emotion for your family to approach that, to find out what was actually happening, but then not get angry because they were supplying it even though they knew that you were struggling. So it's like a contradicting statement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's like even for me now, I've got no what's the word? I've got no bad feelings towards my dealer. In my eyes, he was a nice guy, and I still think he's a nice enough guy now. It was when I look back to my using, and there was times where he would, I can't get down to you, my car's off the road. Oh, I haven't got any. And, I'd be like, don't worry, I'll come up to you now, drink, drug, driving. Or I'd make him, he'd get some off someone else for me. So I think it is hard because I think, he's got a story in himself. And that's most probably what led him down to being a dealer himself. But yeah, it is hard, I think, when they got in contact with him, because they, more than anything, I suppose that night wanted to know the full extent, because they were hoping that I would be coming home so that they could help.
And that's it in a nutshell. When we look at people around us, and if they have supplied things or if they've done things before, then what is the story behind them? Like, I was nothing what you went through with the dealer, but when I was horrifically bullied when I was younger, really, really bad, at the time I was angry, I was confused, I blamed them, and it took me an awful long period of time. But what you've just said there then, even though someone was supplying it and giving it to you, and that contributed to you not being well, you've still held yourself accountable, and so accountable that you were the one who went there. I was accountable that I didn't go and tell my mother and father that I was being bullied, and then what you've done is accepted the fact that that person might have had issues, and unfortunately you were in the way and you were part of that. And it's the same as me when I've accepted the fact that I was being bullied, but that was a long time ago, and who's to say that that person wasn't going through problems as well, and I was their way of expressing themselves in regards to them hitting out. So I think that's a really, really powerful thing. And as I've been going through this, and when I do these talks, I try to relate it along the forward process of seeing you evolve through them stages, like from denial to acknowledging the issue, and then to acceptance and accountability. And what's interesting, I think, what you're in now, you're in the empowerment, but there's also a stage of stabilization that you're in as well. You're in this point of, you're now letting things settle. You're building things in the background, and then with that, then you become even more empowered. So it's incredible to see that flow in regards of how you've transitioned from such a traumatic, horrific experience to then being where you are now. But what was your thoughts? So going out of that, then post that crisis, what did things look like to you? So when you got back, what did help look like?
So when I got back home, then the first point of call that I did was so I think it was a Wednesday I went missing. I was home on the Thursday, so I knew. I went straight to the drug and alcohol services. My mum took me to them to refer myself back in to get under them. I started then attending AA meetings and CA meetings straight away, because I just felt like there was a reason. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe everything happens for a reason, So there was a reason I was still on this planet. So I needed to get well to help others. That was always in the back of my mind from very early on. So I started then trying to get the help. So attending AA and CA. I was doing the drug and alcohol services. But most importantly, I was open to everyone. I didn't hide. I didn't lie. I told everyone. I remember doing a Facebook post on my Facebook where I just admitted to everyone that I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict, and this is what happened. This was why I went missing. Because, at the time I remember like one or two people saying like, oh, do you really want everyone to know your business? And I thought, yeah, I do, because everyone knows who I am around here anyway. I'm so well known within Caerphilly. What's the point of hiding and lying about it? That's going to bring me more shame. That potentially could affect my recovery and getting well and helping others. So I've just got to be open and honest. I had to have some difficult conversations with my partner, with my family, with my friends. I had to acknowledge the hurt and the upset that I caused them. But I had to do that for me to grow and to evolve.
And how did that make you? How did that make you feel? Because I remember there was a time where I openly talked about this. Is started opening up. This last year, I've been very open when I put the book out there, and then building my social media videos where it all started. And even though I don't do as many of them anymore because I've just got so much on what I'm doing, and this is what I'm focusing on a lot now with these podcasts to try and get more people to integrate and talk about the topic. But I know for me, when I openly talked about what I felt when I told everyone mental health, it just felt like the most incredible feeling I've ever experienced, because I felt as if for once in my life, from a very, very young age, I finally looked in the mirror and seen me for who I really am, not this version of here's the mask, who am I looking at? I actually thought, you're missing a tooth, Sam, right? But you're getting there. Do you know what I mean? You're not doing bad, and I'm proud of you. And that was such an amazing feeling. So when you first put that post out there, told all your family, was open, how did it make you feel?
I think you've just hit the nail on the head with regards to the mirror. Like, I, for a long time, struggled to look at myself in the mirror. Like, when I would be putting on my makeup, I would be glancing. I wouldn't be looking at myself. And the minute I was able to actually tell people the truth, to tell people the extent of what was actually going on, how I was feeling, I could look in that mirror again. And yeah, the person who was looking back at me, wasn't fully healed. That person looking back was on the start of their healing journey. But that person looking back, I recognized. I hadn't seen that person for years. That sparkle in the eyes of the person in the mirror twinkling back at me.
I'm grinning because I know the feeling, and for people who are listening to this, who have been there, they will relate to it. And for people who are going through that journey, this is what you have to look forward to, that when we get to that stage where we feel that we can openly talk. And what myself, Daniel, and the guests previous and the guests coming up are trying to do is trying to ensure that people feel brave, or I wouldn't even say if brave, is just feel as if they are confident enough to tell their story and then not be judged. Because I know myself, and I know that every single person who comes on this podcast, I'm not going to judge them. And the likability is, that's your perception of what other people will think and judge you. It's not actually real. A lot of people have been so nearly everyone has been understanding. Like you said, I've had the odd people going, oh, broadcasting your news anyway. What happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. Well, that's fab. However, what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. When that happens, that's when tragedy normally happens. So it's having that open discussion, not being afraid to say, "Look, I'm not okay." It saved me twice. You openly coming out and saying, "I'm not okay," saved you as well. And once we say that, and we're not held on what other people are going to think, if we're soft, if people are going to think, like you said, when you come out as being gay, that feeling, how that made you, hiding your sexuality, all these things. Just be proud of who you are. It doesn't. It makes no difference if you're born with three legs. It just nothing. You just be proud of who you are, embrace who you are, and then use that then at your best ability. Because as soon as we start hiding to try to please everyone else and not hurt anyone else, the only person we're hurting in all that is us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's about just being, I think it's about being open and honest. And sadly, I think we come from generations of people, like you said, who just say, what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. And then that is what then leads people to tragedy. I've lost people myself to suicide. My uncle committed suicide. I had clients who've done it, and I wish that they actually most probably spoke up about how they truly were feeling.
Yeah, it's difficult. What as you were getting well then and things started turning around, going past January, even though to make that transition from being independent alcohol and coke as well, what was the hardest part of getting well?
I think the hardest part of getting well for me was acknowledging feelings. For years I was numbing those feelings. So I've had to learn now to sit comfortably with them, to sit with feelings of sadness at times, or anxiety where you feel overwhelmed because we're in life. For me, life isn't a smooth road. There's different turnings, there's potholes, there's bridges, so we've got to try to sit with the feelings of life and put things in place, healthy things to help us cope with that.
Yeah, that's. I think we're sitting on our emotions and trying to work out what's real, what's not, how to feel again becomes incredibly difficult because you just when you live in that artificial ball of what you've created yourself through negative coping strategies, it's then trying to reprogram our mind in somewhat to try and understand how we can process that information. So, in regards of like learning more about yourself, because on this journey that you're on, you must be learning an incredible amount about yourself. What are you learning about yourself?
I think for me, when I started my sobriety journey and I was using the rooms of the 12-step fellowships, I it was a funny one because when I was in those rooms, I started developing a mask again, but I started noticing that because I was like, these rooms aren't connecting with me, and I'm starting to pretend to be someone who I think they want me to be. And I've got to leave these rooms now. And that was a very daunting experience because even for my family, when I said to my family, like, look, I'm going to stop going to AA and CA because these aren't the place for me to heal. I know I've got to heal away from these more. And so when I left, then that was the turning point for me where I started listening to myself and started looking at different aspects of my personality. Have I got something undiagnosed going on that maybe I need to have a look at, and maybe that can help me understand my thinking a little bit more, and so on. And that's when then I started really focusing on me, and then starting to create healthy coping mechanisms for when I start getting overwhelmed or anxious, that I'm putting things in place to help me recenter my thinking and to slow my thinking down.
Wow. Yeah, that's so like visually it's incredible to see that kind of process of what you're learning, how you transition, how you're implementing it in everyday life. So what now we've come like full circle in regards to where you've been. What are you doing now in regards to your life? What's happening?
So at the moment now, I am really starting help to help other people suffering in with addictions. I've started doing my sober groups. I do those fortnightly where we come together and we talk life, because that's the other thing. I think when you're for me, I've got to be very careful with addictions, that I know that I still would say I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, someone asked me, but that doesn't define me. So I'm trying to help people to understand that, yeah, that's a little part of you. You still want to be living in the real world with other people. And that's one thing that I found when I was using the rooms of the fellowships. You are just an alcoholic addict and you are different to everyone else. And I was like, no, we're not. We're all human beings. It's just some people have gone one way and some people have gone the other. So for me, with my future, I'm trying to create and grow my Sober Souls brand, and to help give back to others, because a lot with what you're doing with the Forge Within, that childhood trauma unresolved plays a massive part in addictions. um Undiagnosed mental health disorders, neurodivergent things as well, they are all a massive contributing factor, where I think that at the moment there's not enough help out there for people, and that's one thing I really want to create, is more help for people.
Well, I gotta be honest, right? Just been on the call today and the podcast, and hearing you speak about your story and how incredibly well you've conducted yourself in navigating some really tough topics, especially when we talk about your dad, your mum about being a strong one, the night of when you nearly took your own life. You've done incredibly well, and then I know a lot of people who will listen to this, will listen to your story and go, well, I can do that. I've been there, and I know that there are groups out there like the group that you're doing, and where they can come and talk to you and just grow. And that's what it's all about. The way that we look at society at the moment, there's such a demand on the NHS, and I say it every week because I can't stress it enough. There's a lot of services out there like yours, like what I'm doing with the Forge Within, like Andy's Man Club. There's the You Never Walk Alone. There's lots of different groups out there that are trying to do their best to help, and we all need to be working together from the same page, because if we all try to fight over a space, then why are we actually doing it? We're doing it to make that difference on a larger scale, to help people overcome their addictions, their mental health, their marriages, whatever it is. But it's so important that we all work together, and I'm so grateful for you coming on today to allow me to hopefully go through your stories so it can be used in a way that you feel fit, but also to help other people who are also in your situation as well.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, it is, we're very lucky in the UK that we've got an NHS, but they are very overwhelmed at the moment. So, people like yourself, and like you said, the men walk and talk groups, the women walk and talk groups, if we all work together to create these safe spaces while people are waiting on NHS lists to get help professionally, if we can just sit down with someone and just say, how are you? What's going on? That's going to make a difference to that person.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. What we remember, everything has a ripple effect. Everything has a ripple. Once we help one person, that helps the next person, and then that person helps two people, and that person helps four people, and it multiplies. And before long, if we keep at the rate that we're doing and trying to make change, we're going to change society and try to change generational trauma, which is so important. It really, really is. But what I want to do now, before we end, I want to end on 3 questions, and it's something I'm going to start bringing up now every single week, because I think it's really good for you then to leave. I want you to try and to end the podcast as we go out as well, but I want you to end on your message. This is your story. This is your podcast episode. So the first question for you, Dan, okay? So if someone is listening, is hiding behind behind drink, drugs, work, or a smile, what would you want them to hear?
I think I'd want them to hear that it's okay to say you're struggling. Don't hide behind a smile. Just say you can't cope and get help.
I love that. Question 2, what would you say to your younger version of yourself?
I would say, bloody hell, my love, it's been a ride.
Yeah.
But look at what we're achieving now. Everything has happened. You've learned so much. You've grown so much. And I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, so am I, buddy. So am I. And finally, the final question, what does being honest mean to you now?
It means that I can walk with my head held high. I don't have to crouch down anymore. I can walk and think I'm doing something right.
And I can tell you that for cert you have. And the way that I say it again, the way that you carry yourself through the episode has been excellent. You've been an amazing guest, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really, really do, Dan. I hope you all the best in the future. And if you ever need anything, you know where I am. You can reach out. I'll do whatever I can to help out as well. And again, I really do hope you go on to not just achieve your dreams, but to go out there and help the thousands of people who need your help now. And I know that you're going to go out and smash it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my love. I appreciate that.
No problem at all. So thank you, everyone. That's today's episode. We're going to be back at the same time now next week. Next Wednesday, be releasing. We've got Danielle who's coming on, going to be talking about neurodiversity with children and her experiences. But until then, this is the Forge Within podcast, where we have real people telling real stories about how mental health has changed their lives. And hopefully together, we can start changing the stigma around mental health. I'll see you all next week. Bye. Bye.